Chemical engineering. Why did I choose chemical engineering, or to keep it short, Chem Eng? My honest answer to that question is, first, I was told that chemical engineers make a lot of money, and second, I just liked the subject chemistry in high school. That's it, no grand reason. Back then I didn't know anything about chemical engineering. I didn't know what chemical engineers actually did for a living. I didn't know how Chem Eng was going to be like in university. I was only 16. I wasn't mature enough to make a big decision that would impact the next 4 years or so of my life. But what led me to choosing chemical engineering? Well, I came from a science-oriented high school and our education was funded by the government. So as one of the conditions for a scholarship, we had to take up a major related to science, engineering, and/or technology. And just considering what sounds good, eliminating what I didn't like, and just listening to my gut feeling, I just chose chemical engineering because it sounded cool. But before we go into my story, what is chemical engineering? Chemical engineering basically is the production of different goods and products through chemical processes. It does involve a lot of math, physics, and chemistry, of course, but not too hardcore chemistry as one would imagine. Contrary to popular opinion, chemical engineering and chemistry are actually different. A chemist is not necessarily a chemical engineer and vice versa. And personally, I like to view chemical engineering as the mix of industrial chemistry and mechanical engineering. Chem Eng can involve the design of processes and equipment to transform raw materials to valuable products that we use every day. Chem Eng can also involve making processes efficient, troubleshooting problems, and optimizing processes such that you reduce your costs and your losses in manufacturing. Chem Eng can also dive into safety and the environment. Sounds cool, right? Well, it is. Chemical engineering in itself is awesome, but it's studying Chem Eng for me that's not too awesome. Nope. Before I proceed, I just want to share that I made this video not only to help incoming college students make a decision for their future, but to also share important lessons, not Chem Eng lessons, that I still carry up to this day even after graduating with a bachelor's degree in Chem Eng. And of course, as this channel is my channel, I would like to share how God has accompanied me throughout this whole journey, even though somehow I've always questioned why He led me to take up Chem Eng. Now I'm going to share how I was as a Chem Eng student in university. To give context, I was able to pursue my Chem Eng education through 2 scholarships, and so as a scholar, I had grades to maintain. And yes, the pressure was there. In fact, this pressure sort of defined my whole college experience. I felt like I had to excel all the time because I was a scholar, and also because I came from a well-renowned high school. So pressure was a constant in my life. And did I handle the pressure well? Truthfully, no. I've worked under pressure for years, but oddly, I never got used to it. As a Chem Eng student, I always procrastinated, especially when things got too much for me to handle. I would always do things the last minute. I wouldn't study until the day before the test. And in retrospect, I did that because I had a fear of difficult, stressful situations. Because I'll say it straight, chemical engineering is difficult. So I wanted to deal with it in as little time as possible, hence putting off things till the last minute, kind of like me avoiding my prompts. But in the long term, when it comes to retention of what I study, procrastination was something I wish I didn't do so often. So how did I do in Chem Eng? Well, my GPA was above average, but I think that was mostly because I excelled in other subjects like general engineering subjects or minor subjects, but for my Chem Eng major subjects, I sucked. I did not graduate with Latin honors. I actually failed one subject at the very end of my schooling. That automatically disqualified me from getting any honors. It was the first and only time I had failed a subject in school my entire life, and that was also happening at the same time as my equally challenging thesis project. To be honest, this event triggered one of the darkest and lowest points of my life, maybe for another video. I admit I could have done better, but I wasn't in the best position to do so, mostly due to my mental health, the deterioration of my mental health throughout this whole period. I'm not saying this to scare anybody from taking up Chem Eng, but I gotta tell you though, you might have a lot of breakdowns while you study Chem Eng. Even the smartest people in my batch most likely have had breakdowns. I think it's mostly because of too much workload and it's all happening at the same time. Also, I don't think I'm stupid, but Chem Eng has made me feel stupid so many times. Basically, Chem Eng throws punches at you one after the other and you barely have time to recover before the next round. But of course, it still depends on you, your attitude, your perseverance, your endurance, your study habits, your time management. People do excel in Chem Eng. People do enjoy studying Chem Eng. People do understand Chem Eng. There are a lot of pros in taking up Chem Eng as a major, and here are some of them. Number 1, your brain will be trained to think. I may not remember most of what I studied in university, but I do owe a good portion of my current way of thinking to Chem Eng. It made me analytical, logical, and systematic. I've also been accustomed to seeking facts, evidences, and credible sources. It gave me some sort of affinity to numbers. When I see numbers, I don't easily get intimidated because I've probably seen worse numbers and mathematical equations while studying. And I somehow always want to quantify and concretize things as much as possible to make them clearer and more efficient. In Chem Eng, your brain is always stimulated, and that's a good thing. Number 2, chemical engineering graduates are truly versatile. Chemical engineers are sometimes called universal engineers because they can do so many different jobs in a wide variety of industries, and I believe this. Chem Eng is a vast, multidisciplinary field of study that's connected to a lot of industries, so in Chem Eng you have a wide array of job prospects that are exciting and highly impactful to society. The skills and expertise of chemical engineers are in demand all over the world, so a lot of times chemical engineers do have great compensation if that's something you're curious about, but this greatly depends on the industry you're in, the place you're in, the level of experience and expertise that you have. If you're in the Philippines though, I don't want to get your hopes up. Number 3, bragging rights, I guess. If you're into bragging rights or whatever, or better yet, you like a good challenge, or you like living on the edge, and the feeling of a big accomplishment is something that you would want, then chemical engineering could be a way to go. But me, I didn't like being challenged. I didn't like the stress. I didn't like the discomfort of being in a brain-crunching situation all the time. Nope. A challenge is fun every once in a while, but it already sucks when it gets to a point where the challenges don't stop. They just get harder and harder, and they all happen at the same time. So that's con number 1. Basically, Chem Eng is hard. Chem Eng is intellectually, emotionally, and even physically challenging. Info overload, lots of problems to analyze and solve. I can imagine that for some people this is exciting, but it gets really tough when the workload is becoming too much and your time is becoming too little. And there will be a lot of times when you will lack sleep. If you don't have good time management, if you have some sort of phobia of numbers and formulas, and most importantly, if you're not into what you're doing, then you're bound to have a difficult time studying Chem Eng. But of course, this con can be countered by exerting enough effort. I know people who are not naturally gifted in this field but are able to make up for it through their hard work and grit. Con number 2, Chem Eng jobs can be demanding and can place you in hazardous work environments. Although I am not practicing chemical engineering per se as a profession, I do know that a lot of Chem Eng jobs can be demanding, challenging technical roles, long shifts, and possible exposure to different kinds of hazards and health risks, especially when you're handling toxic chemicals or certain equipment. And this is why safety is more than a priority for chemical engineers, especially those who work in plants and laboratories. But just like con number 1, con number 2 is one thing you can do something about. When all said and done, it depends on you, your priorities, your capabilities, how you will take these pros and cons into account. If you think that the pros would outweigh the cons, then go for it. But if you don't really see a great match between Chem Eng and your interests and strengths, then remember there are still so many other great majors out there that you can always consider. Now I'll talk more about the potential careers when you take Chem Eng as a major. There's the traditional path. You can be an engineer in a process plant, and there are several industries that hire chemical engineers specifically. You can work as an engineer in the oil and gas industry, food production, consumer goods manufacturing, pharmaceuticals industry, chemical manufacturing, wastewater treatment facilities, plant and equipment design firms, and even for government agencies. You can also work as a technical consultant, for instance, in an environmental consulting firm. And you can even be a professor if you have a passion for teaching and you want to pursue higher education, PhD maybe. You can also be a researcher in the fields of Chem Eng, biotechnology, product development, and so many others. Or you could take the non-traditional path. There are actually lots of alternative careers for chemical engineers. We can also work a lot of functions in business, supply chain, logistics and planning, process improvement, intellectual property management, project management, and even finance. Some of us even end up in tech as software engineers and IT engineers. And a lot of us end up being in managerial or leadership roles. The point is, chemical engineering is good to have as a bachelor's degree. It makes you flexible for a lot of career options. But graduating Chem Eng does not guarantee success. It depends on you. It also depends on the opportunities or lack thereof that you would be exposed to. And like most other people, most of us have to start at the bottom of the career ladder. It's good to strive for excellence and success, but it's important to not compare yourself to other people because we have different paths and timelines in life. Let God lead you, consult with Him first before you make big decisions, and trust Him wherever He places you. And wherever He places you, work for His glory. So, was taking up Chem Eng in university worth it for me? To tell you the truth, I did not like chemical engineering. Sometimes I wish I had taken up a different course, something that I would have enjoyed, something that excites me and makes me genuinely interested to learn. I wish I had taken up a course that didn't give me anxiety. I wish I didn't have to drag myself to school. But to be fair, that time when I was making a choice, I had limited options and also a very narrow perspective. I had a lot of misconceptions and gaps in my decision-making process. Of course, it differs with each person and possibly where you studied or how your education system works. But for me, if I could go back in time, I would not choose chemical engineering. Sorry. But I do believe that God allows us to take certain paths because He uses those to achieve His purposes for our life. My last 2 years in university happened to be the most difficult 2 years of my life thus far, but those 2 years were a solid proof of God's faithfulness in my life, especially at my lowest points. If you ask me, my biggest regret in college is allowing my emotions, fear, anxiety, and negative thoughts to get the best of me. How I wish I had imbibed 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7, "For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline." So I can say that for me, chemical engineering was worth it, not in itself, not studying it, but because it has taught me many of the most important lessons in my life and in my relationship with Christ. Although now I work in an industry that commonly hires chemical engineers, my job is not really on the production side, but more of the supply chain management side, so it's a less traditional path. Nevertheless, I do trust God's bigger plan for my life and my greater role in His kingdom, and I know that He makes no mistakes. So considering everything I've shared here, should you choose chemical engineering? Well, it's up to you, but it's definitely worth considering. But I can tell you when you should not take chemical engineering. Number one, don't choose Chem Eng if you have not the slightest affinity or inclination to math, physics, and chemistry, because you will be facing these giants for a long time. You don't necessarily have to be good at these subjects because that's workable, that's learnable over time, but if you're allergic to these subjects, then it would probably be best for you to tackle other majors instead. Number two, don't choose Chem Eng if you're only in it for the money. The money is not a guarantee, especially at the beginning of your career. Again, it depends on a lot of factors, and although money is very important, it still pays in the long run to work for a job that you actually like and not just something that pays the bills. Number three, don't choose Chem Eng if you want a smooth sailing, relatively chill college experience. It probably won't give you that. If you want to save your suffering for a later part of your life, then don't choose Chem Eng. Number four, don't choose Chem Eng only because your parents or the adult figures in your life tell you to. They're not the ones who studied for years. They're not the ones who worked the job either. That's you. Of course, it's okay and it's even beneficial to seek and consider advice from other people, especially those you look up to. But if you feel forced in any way and you feel that you're not aligned with this course, then I hope hope that you'll be brave enough to make a decision for yourself. And you can always Google things nowadays, right? Most importantly, you can consult with God about it. That actually is the wisest thing to do. You can choose to take up Chem Eng because it sounds cool, because it really is, but I hope that's not the only reason. And if ever you decide to choose Chem Eng, or if you've already chosen Chem Eng, then please watch out for the second part of this video where I will talk about crucial tips and tricks for chemical engineering students and engineering students in general. Comment below if you have questions about this and if you have topics that you want me to talk about in the next video. In the meantime, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye!